Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Some researchers in Vermont spend a lot of time looking at what's in the ground. It's work that helps farmers and landowners keep their soil healthy, which is good for the land and for our waterways. Researchers also help Vermonters by staying on top of new technologies, techniques, and ideas from around the globe. Recently, an innovative idea made its way to the Northeast. It's an idea that scientists at the University of Vermont are putting to the test. The UVM scientists are inviting others to learn more about it by seeing it in action. Rebecca Gollin has our story.
Farmers in Vermont have used compost to increase the nutrients in their soil for many years. Now, there's a new method of producing compost that researchers in the state are taking a look at.
It's a cold compost process. It's an unturned, and it's a quiet compost process. So you don't have to turn, so it doesn't heat up.
Juan Alves is a pasture and soil health expert with the University of Vermont's Center for Sustainable Agriculture. He's talking about the Sioux method of composting, which began in New Mexico and shows a lot of promise. On this day, Alves is hosting a workshop to share more about the technique.
The Sioux composting method is very low maintenance. It requires a little bit of assembling at the beginning, where you just need a pallet, barbed wire, and some pipes to put in the middle.
Once the apparatus is loaded with material, it's left to sit for about a year. At the end of that time, there's compost ready to use. Being a cold compost means that the pile doesn't need the same kind of maintenance as traditional compost.
The normal composting requires multiple turnings, to digest all the materials, to digest all the carbon, to break pathogen cycles, to break all the anaerobic bacteria, and you go through a series of heat, turn, basically, until it becomes like a mature product. That's the typical compost process. The Sioux process, you add all the materials, wet materials. They could be leafy greens, they could be fall leaves, even manure and some food scraps.
Pipes are placed in the structure to allow space for oxygen to circulate, which activates a host of different microorganisms and fungi than other types of compost. Here at the Center for Technology in Essex, they built a couple of the Sioux bins, or bioreactors, about a year ago.
It was interesting to try something new.
Forestry and horticulture instructor Brian Japp was up for trying out the technique. When Alves contacted him with the idea, Japp got his students involved.
It tied in really nicely to our machinery operation and some of the community service at this time of year doing yard cleanup that we do in the center.
These were all done exactly a year ago.
Okay.
And we just opened them yesterday.
Excellent. Looks great.
So when you open them...
Japp and his colleagues recently opened the bins they made last year to see the results. They didn't know what to expect.
In 1 year, there was a 50% reduction in the volume of the materials that we put into the reactor. So it dropped by half. And when we opened them up and started using that material, it was really visibly to the naked eye dense in fungi. We actually had to physically break it up. It was like a compact nugget of compost.
And I've been working with compost for about 20 years of various kinds, and I've learned a lot from my mistakes and others.
Kat Buxton is a consultant for soil health and composting in Sharon. She also manages several school gardens.
I am very interested in fungal-dominated compost, knowing that most of the compost we create is generally bacterial-dominated. And in order to have healthy soil, we want to have a nice ratio of fungal to bacterial and large diversity.
With upcoming changes to Vermont's universal recycling laws, it's increasingly important for schools, businesses, and towns to think about how they deal with their waste.
People generally don't know how to manage their yard waste or their food waste. And the two can work well together, but depending on where you live in Vermont, you have more yard waste than you produce food waste.
Buxton researched the Johnson-Sioux method and came to the workshop to see it in action.
I learned that this is really doable. It's everything that I saw on the YouTube videos. It's very accessible, it's very affordable. It can freeze through the winter, which was one of my concerns. How is it going to react to our region? And I saw some great compost back there. So I learned that it's possible and accessible, and I'm excited.
I've always been interested in compost. I have a food service background, so there's always food, scraps, waste, things that are a part of it.
Mark Burns is a master gardener and composter and works with an elementary school in Addison County. He came to the workshop looking for new ways to deal with the school's compostables.
Just learn about how that system works, just in terms of the microbes that are involved with it. It's a different system than hot composting. And then we also learned how to physically put one of these things together, starting off with a pallet and using the wire and actually loading some of the bins up.
After seeing how to put together the bins and what the compost looks like when it comes out, the process seems to have won over some of today's participants.
For me, user-friendly is something that things need to be. And I think all in all, once you get these frames built for this type of system and they are reusable, yeah, I think it'll work cool. I would definitely do it.
Yeah, do you think you will?
Absolutely.
Some attendees will go home and try the technique. Some have a head start.
So I'm experimenting with different versions and all that, just, in my backyard.
Jim Stiles is passionate about soil health. He tried a version of the Johnson-Sioux that was not as successful as he wanted, but he's hopeful that his next one will be.
I've accomplished some of the same things as with a Johnson-Sioux reactor, but with a different configuration that has some other advantages. But hopefully in a year from now, we will see how my results differ from the results here, because I've done some things differently. And it's all part of that learning process.
And that learning process is ongoing. The compost produced here in Essex is part of an experiment that compares a number of different composting techniques. UVM's Juan Alves is overseeing that larger project. And though he doesn't have all of the results yet, what he has seen from the Johnson-Sioux method is encouraging.
When you teach about something and you want to change, anything you want people to adopt has to be at least equal, if not better, than the previous technology. So I thought these had the potential because of the amount of living microorganisms. Johnson-Sioux scored like one of the best composts, across the 8 different other composts.
Alves' study will look at the economic value of compost as well as the nutrient value of the different methods. And while he can't say for sure until he has those final results, for now, Johnson-Sioux seems to be a simple, low-cost, low-maintenance process that can be done in a backyard or school with a high rate of success. And that's just the kind of solution these soil enthusiasts are hoping for. In Essex, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Rebecca. File our next story under the heading, Necessity is the Mother of Invention. Like many home brewers in Vermont, Andrew Peterson thought of opening his own brewery. He quickly realized what a lot of us already know. There's great beer being brewed in the Green Mountains. So Peterson decided if he couldn't open a brewery, he'd do the next best thing. Keith Silva has the story.
What's going on in this barn hasn't happened in Vermont for over 150 years.
I am Vermont's maltster, yes, with an S.
At Peterson's Quality Malt in Moncton, the ancient process of malting starts with a canoe paddle, a couple of converted maple sap tanks, and a lot of passion.
It goes back about 11,000 years. This is a very simple process, but complicated at the same time. I'm taking cereal grains and I'm converting the starches into sugars that can be used in brewing and distilling. You can malt any kind of cereal grain. So that's whether it be wheat, barley, rye, the 3 most common ones. It's a fairly simple 3-step process. You're going to soak the grain then you're going to let it germinate, and then you're going to kiln it.
Drying the grain in the kiln locks the sugars in place. Mill it, add water, yeast, maybe some hops, allow it to ferment, and you've got beer. Vermont is first in the nation for breweries and brew pubs per capita. Peterson considers his business craft malt, which means, like the state's craft brewing industry, it's robust but small.
At this point, we probably have about 10 regular customers. Most of our brewers are within 25 miles. The larger breweries couldn't use us. We don't have enough supply for them to do that realistically. So mostly we're working with smaller craft breweries and brew pubs. My estimation is that of the beer that's made in Vermont and that stays in Vermont, so that eliminate the stuff that goes out of state, that probably uses roughly about 22 million pounds a year. And when we're going full capacity, we can do about 200 tons. So roughly 2%.
What Peterson's business lacks in size, it makes up for in flexibility, creativity, and uniqueness.
We have them in a 500-liter.
All distinctions Master Brewer Todd Hare looks for in the beer he brews at Foam in Burlington.
We're probably using right now around 60-75% of our base malt bill comes from Andrew Peterson, and that's a Pilsner. We use a lot of his wheat as well, but we find that malt is fantastic for the beers that we're doing. It just contributes a really nice flavor in the end of the beer and so forth, but definitely unique.
I like the idea of driving the industry with a better product. I want to taste a better beer. How do you get there? And with beer, it's somewhat limiting. I mean, sure, you can throw in some puree of something or other, but you can't have beer without malt. And how do you make a better malt? How do you get a better flavor out of it? And that's sort of what's driving us at this point. It's like, what can we do in every batch to get the most extract out of it, to give the brewers something truly different that they haven't had before.
All the grain Peterson malts is grown in Vermont. Finding grain in an agricultural landscape dominated by corn and hay is challenging, which is why Peterson contacted UVM Extension.
UVM Extension was one of the first places I reached out to. I was familiar with the grain trials they were doing up in Alberg, and talked to Heather and Erica there. They've been invaluable.
We've been working with Andrew for many years. We've provided him with lots of valuable connections, both in the farming community, in the brewing community, and with other craft maltsters throughout the Northeast. And now helping farmers grow barley so that he has product to use in his business. A really important part of Extension is bringing people together, creating networks and creating opportunities for people to meet each other and learn from other people, not just from us.
The research they've been doing is stuff that I'm looking at every year, determining what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. They have introduced me to most of the grain growers in the state, which there are not that very many, but they know all of them well. They also have a testing lab now, so they're able to do malt quality testing, which is, again, I couldn't tell a brewer that what my barley's got without them. So here you actually have an academic wing that is legitimizing what we're doing, which is fantastic.
If the trend holds, craft brewing will continue to increase in Vermont. Its success will depend on the product and the consumer.
I think most craft beer consumers aren't thinking about the ingredients in their beer. I don't think it's wrong. It's just never been a conversation we've had before. The Vermont brewers are just an outstanding group, and they've put Vermont on the map so that tourists are driving here to get their beer. For me to play a part in that is phenomenal for me. That was my dream, to be part of the Vermont brewing world and watching these guys produce, and then being able to use something local that came from the hard work that we're putting in is incredibly rewarding.
Peterson's Quality Malt is a one-of-a-kind Vermont business, and with any luck, it won't stay that way for long. In Moncton, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Thanks, Keith, and thank you for joining us. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.